Hi, I'm Lisa Kudrow. I'm glad you're here today. Mental health care and education is important to me. That's why I chose to become involved at UCLA, joining the Resnick Neuropsychiatric Hospital Board of Advisors and emceeing the galas and #WOW, the Wonder of Women Summit. I'm so excited that WOW and UCLA's Friends of Semel Institute Open Mind have joined together to bring outstanding, free virtual programs about mental health issues. This means you will hear conversations on the intersection of culture and science between renowned authors and filmmakers who share their personal stories and world-class UCLA scientists that highlight the latest in mental health research, care, and progress. I'm thrilled to welcome you to our Open Mind WOW series and hope to see you at many more programs.
Hi, thank you so much for joining us. I'm Vicki Goodman, and on behalf of the Friends of the Semel Institute for Neuroscience and Human Behavior at UCLA, the Resnick Neuropsychiatric Hospital Board of Advisors, and WOW, the Wonder of Women, it is my pleasure to welcome you to our Open Mind screening and discussion of the groundbreaking new documentary film, BEDLAM, An Intimate Journey into America's Mental Health Crisis, written, produced, and directed by author, filmmaker, and psychiatrist, Dr. Kenneth Paul Rosenberg. BEDLAM, which was filmed over the course of 5 years in Los Angeles, takes us on an emotional journey by examining the mental health crisis through intimate stories of those in and out of ERs, jails, and homeless encampments. The discussion portion of today's program features preeminent local and national leaders in the mental health community. We are honored to welcome what I like to refer to as our dream team of experts who will share their unique perspectives and knowledge about the mental health care system. The discussion will be moderated by filmmaker Dr. Rosenberg. And in the interest of time, we won't share the bios of each of the panelists, which are incredibly impressive, but a little bit too long for this program. So here are their names and titles in alphabetical order. Judge Songhai Armstead, Executive Director, Alternatives to Incarceration Initiative, Alternatives to Crisis Response, Measure J, and Youth Justice, County of Los Angeles. Los Angeles District Attorney George Gascon. Felicia Jones, Executive Director, Healthy African American Families, and I'm proud to say a Friends of Semel Institute board member. The Honorable Patrick Kennedy, former Congressman from Rhode Island and founder of the Kennedy Forum, and honored to say a past Friends of Semel Gala honoree. And Dr. Jonathan E. Sherin, Director of the Los Angeles County Department of Mental Health. We'd like to thank all of our panelists for taking their time from their busy schedules to be with us today. I'll be turning this over to Dr. Rosenberg in just a moment so he can introduce his brilliant film, but I want to briefly give you the run of show for today. We will begin by screening the first half of BEDLAM. Then at approximately 5:55, we will stop the film and the panel discussion will begin. The discussion will go till approximately 6:30 p.m., at which time we will screen the remainder of the film. Closing remarks at 7:15. And lastly, the discussion portion of today's program will be taped and will be available for viewing on a Friends of Semel YouTube channel, which is located on the Friends of Semel website, friendsofsemel.org. So thank you all for tuning in today. And now please join me in giving a warm Zoom welcome to Dr. Kenneth Paul Rosenberg. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Vicki, and a huge thanks to the Friends of Semel Institute and the Resnick Neuropsychiatric Hospital Board of Advisors, to Jason Liu, who's orchestrating all this, to our team at PBS, ITVS, our impact producer, Jesse DeBruin, and my co-producer and friend, Peter Miller, all of us working hard to put on what I really feel is just an incredible event, an incredible opportunity for us to not only bring Bedlam to you, but to bring this incredible panel to you. Tonight's screening is divided up into several parts, as Vicki was saying. First, we will have the 45 minutes of the film, first 45 minutes, after which I will moderate a panel for at least a half an hour. And then we'll watch the last half hour of the film. And as Vicki said, the panel is an illustrious one, includes George Gascon, Los Angeles County District Attorney, Dr. Jonathan Sherin, Director, LA County Department of Mental Health, Felicia Jones, Executive Director, Healthy African American Families and Seminole Board Member, Judge Songhai Armstead, Executive Director, Alternatives to Incarceration, and everyone's friend, former Congressman Patrick Kennedy, founder of the Kennedy Forum, and one of the great health advocates, mental health advocates of our time. Welcome back. So we will watch the other half of Bedlam in a moment. I want to thank you all for being here and thank my incredible panelists. I'm going to reintroduce them as they come on. George Gascon, Los Angeles County District Attorney. Felicia Jones, Executive Director, Healthy African American Families and Friends of Seminole Board Member. Judge Songhai Armstead, Executive Director, Alternatives to Incarceration. Former Congressman Patrick Kennedy, one of the lead authors of the landmark Mental Health Parity and Addiction Equity Act, and today, one of America's foremost mental health advocates. And Jonathan Sherin, Director of Los Angeles County Department of Mental Health, a longtime well-being advocate who has worked tirelessly through his career to help vulnerable populations at the local, state, and national level. Thank you all for watching. We are live, so hopefully we'll have the technology will cooperate. But also, I think it's not lost on anyone that this is an extraordinarily challenging time for America, and particularly for Los Angeles. So I really can't thank you enough for being here. And also, probably isn't a better time to talk about mental health here in America and here in Los Angeles. So I'm going to start with Dr. Sherin. And you've seen the film many times, I think probably 5 or 6 times. And you know that at the end of the film, which we will see, that the mental health jail, that jail that they were going to build, was canceled in favor of community-based models of care. So Dr. Sherin, could you let us know about that community-based care and what it's going to look like in LA and where you're at in terms of expanding these initiatives? Dr. Sherin.
Thanks a lot, Ken. And I have seen the film a bunch, and as I tell you every time, it's very impactful. It really reminds me of my training in earlier years when I did a lot of heavy-duty clinical care. In short, which I think is covered in the beginning of the film, the deinstitutionalization movement in the United States was not done responsibly. And I think that, what was called the Mental Health Treatment Center, which was actually a custody environment and had been planned for many years, was a move in the wrong direction. And I want to salute the Board of Supervisors and other leaders for having the courage, and they were prompted by many people, to cancel that contract and to move towards a care first, jail last approach. Recognizing that public health is public safety for many people. And recognize also the Alternatives to Incarceration effort led by Supervisor Kuehl, the Alternative Crisis Response effort, which Supervisor Hahn has driven, which will allow us to respond with Health and Human Services more so than law enforcement when indicated. And the fact of the matter is that there's a massive need to expand treatment beds across this county. My department studied it. We filed reports. We probably have about half of the beds that we need to provide care and treatment that's nourishing, as opposed to custody environments, which are at some level fundamentally punitive. But the thing that I want to recognize big time here is that the grassroots community and the voice of the people our stakeholders has been the most powerful driver, and the alignment between the grassroots folks who have been for so long advocating and our decision makers is really quite unusual, and that cannot be underestimated in terms of its importance. And what it's leading us to do is to recognize that we live in a society, in a community where things like systemic trauma and disenfranchisement of populations actually interferes with access to care. And that, you know, through these efforts to shift towards reform, we will finally invest in communities and develop enriched communities that are inclusive in the way that JFK had kind of mandated and frankly led not just in our country, but around the world. And it's not just about treatment. It's also about people, place, and purpose, because everybody needs those things in order to have a chance to thrive. And in each of those areas, this county and this department are trying, desperately to move the needle, to provide more resource for people who have to be embraced in our communities and recognized and supported as human beings with dignity.
Thanks so much. I'm sure we all could not agree with you more. I want to turn very quickly to District Attorney Gascon. Thank you again for joining us. You know, when we made this film and I wrote the book, I was hoping that we could have at least a couple of people read it or watch it who could be in a position to influence, the course of mental health care. And I was just honestly so moved and so grateful that you actually read the book and referred to it when someone said, how could we understand your policies? I wonder if you can elaborate more for us and for Los Angelenos about what humane care and alternatives to incarceration mean for you and how you hope to enact that.
Sure. Well, first of all, I think sometimes we actually underestimate the impact of mental health in the criminal justice system. I know that you heard the numbers that 20% of the people in county jail have acute needs, or 40% have had some level of care or a need for mental health. But if you go even a little earlier, I mean, if you look at most of the people that we deal with in the criminal justice system are generally impacted by early childhood trauma and victimization that continues to develop throughout their life. And the reality is that the criminal justice system is very poorly equipped to deal with this. And, we've sort of became the place that everybody goes to, but by increased criminalization, and I know that I'm saying something that everybody in this group agrees with, all we're doing is we keep kicking the can down and not addressing the problem. And when I became the district attorney in San Francisco back in 2011, I made a very clear commitment to start moving away from that. And actually before LA, San Francisco was going to build a mental health jail in 2015. And I fought that, and eventually we stopped that in 2016. And when I was approached, before even I thinking about coming to LA, by people that were trying to oppose the building of a mental health jail in LA, I joined that effort very early on. And the reason why I did so, and why you see the policies, and why I'm asking my prosecutors to read your book, Dr. Rosenberg, is because I think that, to a great extent, the criminal justice system has been part of the problem. Now, I'm not going to say that we own all of the problem, because, we are part of an ecosystem. But I want to make sure that where we can, that we begin to move away from doing harm by our policies. And certainly, it's great to have mental health diversion, but if the prosecutors are fighting it, then we don't get a lot of diversion, right? So I wanted to make sure that we begin to have an earnest conversation in my office. And I thought your book was a perfect vehicle for that conversation. Because the policies are there because they're supported by science, but it's nice when people actually go beyond the policy and begin to understand why the policies are being put in place.
Well, like Dr. Sherin, that's got to be a tough path for you to take. I mean, it's to be a progressive DA probably has some challenges. I imagine, yes, sir.
Well, yes. You know, look, I mean, I tell people that the criminal justice system is steep in tradition, right? And you have generation upon generation of police officers, prosecutors, and judges that basically will build around the last 30, 40 years. And, as we became more and more punitive, as we became the de facto place where the people with mental health problems came to. And, moving away from tradition is very hard, right? And there's obviously a pushback there. And then there's also the reality that there is both political and monetary interest in doing this, right? I mean, we build more prisons instead of building hospitals or schools. We hire more cops instead of hiring more teachers or more prosecutors. So there's also that incentive, if you will, that, while people may not really understand it, it's certainly there. There is a monetary component to this. I tell people that we built 22 prisons in California in the last 30 years in one public university. Well, you can see where the money went. We defunded mental health, we defunded public education many years ago, and we shifted and reallocated that money into prisons, jails, prosecution, and police. And having those conversations are very hard, right? Because you have a political and an economic structure that is built around the way that we do business today.
Thanks so much. I want to turn to you, Judge, if I may. You are a leading thought leader in providing alternative sentencing for people with serious mental illness who are arrested for criminal behaviors. And we see in the film, and we'll see when we return to the film, the importance, utility of diversion. And I would add, we'll see the tragedy when there isn't diversion. And I know, this is our first time meeting, Judge, but you were at the last time we were at the Semel Institute and watched the film, parts of it before. So could you tell us, as a judge and in your new role, and maybe you can elaborate on that, Judge, if you would please, what do you see as the role in the courts in keeping people in need out of the criminal justice system, or at least placing them squarely in treatment?
First of all, thank you for the opportunity to be here. And I've seen the film before, but as I watched it again, it brought up a lot of stuff inside of me prior to me being a judicial officer. I designed and created programs within Skid Row. So I walked those streets and I, was there when all the hospital dumping cases were happening and all of that. I think, the part that people forget, whether you're the judge or the prosecutor, you're still a human, right? And you're dealing with real lives. And so the thing that was very important, I know John can attest, Dr. Sherin can attest to this, because I quite often, he got text messages and calls from me in the middle of court when I'm like, this is not the system for a person to be in. And it brought up so many things. I mean, there were times when I literally left the bench to go talk a person out of a cell because, 20 sheriffs ran into the courtroom because the person wouldn't respond or the person wouldn't man down or they were decompensating, and I think we have to do a better job. I mean, you saw a friend of mine, Judge Dohe, there, who was handling that case, and he can tell you many years ago, I took him to Skid Row and to Midnight Mission and had him sit down and have lunch to say, look, this is the population that we're dealing with. But there are many judges who want to do good work. I think there's two challenges. One is a lack of resources, right? And the lack of information. I mean, it's very challenging. I mean, I've had people come to court with a hospital gown on and literally socks. They've just been released from a hospital. They took that one token, came to court, and they're not dressed and they're decompensating, medication's wearing out, and we're not equipped. That's not the place where people belong. We have to do a better job of building up systems of care. And Dr. Sherin is, and I think all of us on this call are working on doing that. And we're going to have to be very, very creative because as the DA just said, funding has shifted. It's shifted to other places, I remember when UCLA, I used to be on the board at the Alumni Association for the law school, and they talked about how in California, they used to pay for 70% of what it costs for a person to go to school and 30% went to incarceration, and how those numbers have switched. And I have no idea what it is now, but we're putting our resources in the wrong places. We're not investing in healthy communities. We're not investing in healthy families. We're not investing in the resources that we need to give people and take care of our communities. And it comes back to bite us, right? But we're not doing the job that we need to do. I don't even know if I'm answering your question, but it's
No,
bringing up.
you are, but Judge, let me ask you specifically, tell me,
Yes.
because you wear so many hats and it's a
Yes.
new role. It's a vital role. I think everyone, probably all 700 people watching are very excited truly about what you're doing. Tell us, if you can, specifically what the plans are and what you
So
specifically want to accomplish.
absolutely. So we are trying to stretch every dollar in the county. We're trying to evaluate every resource and make sure that they're getting the outcomes that we're hoping that they're getting. We're having to be even more creative in this space right now because LA has been impacted with COVID. We've lost tax revenue. And so we're really looking to do a lot of public-private partnerships as much as we can to stretch Measure J dollars. Measure J is probably not going to be the amounts that people think that they will be because it's 10% of money that's not already classified for something else. Half of that has to go to being able to pull in state and federal funding. And then there's another portion that's already, which is like GR. And then there's a little bit left. And that's what we'll be working with to try to help build systems. About 13 months, there was a group of community advocates, providers that put together a bunch of recommendations through the ATI work group. We are working to realize those as much as possible. Looking at, what things can we do, what legislative changes we need, what funding changes we need, what policy changes we need to realize most of those recommendations. We have some programs that are rolling out probably this month where we're actually putting the service providers 24 hours a day into the 10 busiest police and sheriff stations, and the people on the call, the DA and Dr. Sherin and others are partnering with us. So we're funding that, which is very, very expensive, but we want those who need services and resources and don't have very serious cases that we pull them out before they're even booked into custody. Also in 8 courthouses, we're expanding where there will be case managers and service providers in the court. So the courts will have alternatives. So we're expanding what was a small pilot into 8 of the busiest courthouses in LA County. So those, I've got approval from the board about 2 Tuesdays ago, and we'll be executing contracts this week and next week. So we're excited about that work. And I've been here 90 days. So we're trying to move forward.
That's a pretty good 90 days. Let me turn to Patrick, because Patrick, you and I have been speaking about this film for years. You actually appear in the film, as people will see later in the second half. You must be very, you started this well over a decade. I mean, your journey is personal and a political one. You must be very excited to see that that this epicenter of the crisis in Los Angeles is now possibly a model for change.
Well, thank you, Ken, and to you and Peter, thank you for producing this film and pouring so much of your own soul into making it and to getting it out there. It's such an important narrative, and for using it as a lever to change our whole approach. And I don't think anybody can look at the film and not see that the system is fundamentally broken and that we need to follow these efforts that Dr. Sherin is taking on, which, I just get goosebumps when I see my uncle talking about the Community Mental Health Act of 1963. That was the model that is the model today. And Dr. Sherin is trying to build out in LA County. It's a model that emphasizes the supportive housing for so many people who are otherwise on the streets and vulnerable. If they have a stable place to live, the dollars are in the system. They're just not being spent in the most cost-effective way, as the district attorney said. And it's a tough thing as the district attorney said, for us to realign the incentives to pay for things that are going to get us a bigger bang for our buck, and it shouldn't be about the money, but we all are political realists and know that in a good sense, the alignment financially really aligns to our humanistic thinking that people would be better off living full, optimal lives in their own community, supported by peers, supported by those physicians, and having, frankly, like the certified community behavioral health centers, which are really just taken out of the page of John F. Kennedy's Community Mental Health Act or President Carter and Mrs. Carter's Community Mental Health Systems Act. I mean, these are not kind of revolutionary changes, but we just have to pay for them. So it's coming up with new models. The real challenge for all of us is not to, we all agree on the philosophy. It's now trying to get the systems of government to align reimbursement in this way. And I'm excited because there was a guy that said, don't tell me what your values are. Show me your budget and I will tell you what your values are. And that man is about to be sworn in as the next president of the United States tomorrow. And I really think we have a historic opportunity with President Biden, with the changes that we can make in CMS in reimbursing on a systemic basis for expansion of Medicaid for CCBHCs, these certified community behavioral health centers, prospective payment models of care. So we're not constantly spending all of our efforts chasing down reimbursement or documenting every type of a service in order to get that particular service reimbursed. But what is helping to stabilize people? And it's going to be different for each person. And in a fundamental way, this is kind of personalized medicine for people with mental illness. People are going to need medication. They're going to need a doctor. But as Dr. Sherin said, they're going to need a whole lot of other things, purpose, place. And we can get more effective supports for people, stabilize their lives, reduce their symptoms and their suffering if we spend our dollars on different things. And I'm so excited about the J proposal and look forward to working with Dr. Armstead, because I said to her before the call, people are looking for these models all over the country. I'm hearing it from everywhere. So if you guys in LA really and you got great alignment, you got the DA here on the call, you got the director of mental health of the county on the call, you have the new judge assigned to this alternatives. I mean, you've got alignment. I think you've got a governor that cares about this, just signed SB 855. You've got the federal court case in Northern California that changes the way private payers pay for these things, so they can no longer dump their fully insured population onto the counties through Prop 63 and allow you, the taxpayers of California, to subsidize the corporate welfare of the big insurers who are shifting all of their high cost patients onto the taxpayer, as opposed to them paying for following their fiduciary responsibility and obligation to pay for the care that they're entrusted to pay for. So you've got the pressures coming in all different forms, and you've got all the carrots and incentives coming in all different forms. So there may be a chance for us to finally change this system, especially with criminal justice reform coming down the pike, as well as one of the nation's first priorities of the new administration. I think the things are aligning right now to address the problems that you're seeing displayed in your film.
Thank you so much.
So well.
Thank you so much. Felicia, I want to turn to you, Ms. Jones, for a moment. You wear many hats. You're CEO of Healthy African-American Families. You have lived experience, which perhaps you could talk about. And I think it's really important to say that often people with lived experience who themselves have experienced mental illness are often left out of the conversation and have so much to add. And I'm so grateful that you could join us as a CEO and as a person who's kind of been there, done that sort of thing. So tell us a little bit more about what you have learned. I know you've studied this recently with Dr. Ken Wells. We spoke earlier about that. I think there's some lessons that you could share with us, which I'd love to hear. Please, Felicia.
Well, first of all, let me thank you. I really appreciate you and your film. I think that it really shed a lot of light on the mental health issues that we're all facing and have faced for many, many years. And as an African-American and in my community, my grandmother in Boston, Massachusetts, was a nurse in the mental health facility there for many, many years. And so, but mental health stigma has been a big problem, so especially in minority communities. And I would say in particular, African-American community, as which that I'm representing now, it's been very hard to even just talk about mental health. And then the criminalization that happens once you then say something like, I'm suicidal, or I feel suicidal. What might come from that? Department of Children's Services may get involved, the police may arrest you, and all these other things that are a domino effect, plus the stigma that comes along with it. So one of the things that we have been trying to do for many years and working with Dr. Wells is to demystify what mental health looks like in the minority community, and also to bridge the gap of how do you leverage this understanding of how do you engage communities of color around stigmas and mental health, and then also how do you partner up with institutions that otherwise would not really have community at the table with lived experience. So, you know, these kind of things have been able to, you know, we started out in, what was it, 2004, to, you know, start to even just have a conversation about depression and depression care, which was a partnership with UCLA with Witness for Wellness. And out of that, we did another big randomized project called Community Partners in Care that looked at entering communities of color with a community engagement core, community engagement and planning core, and then a resource for services, which randomized 95 agencies within community service agencies and public sectors with people that are treating people for depression and depression care, using our model of a low-scale CBT model of engagement, which was modified in the CEP, and then resource for services got basically what was available in technical assistance for these services. And what we found was with just that amount of engagement, reduce the depression care, reduce the recidivism rate of people going in and out of the hospital. It reduced unemployment rate for people that were unemployed, for people who were dealing with depression. So just that minor amount of engagement had increased help for people that were suffering from depression. And just as a person that dealt with depression, I mean, I dealt with depression since I was a teenager. It's unheard of. You know, people weren't talking about depression. I'm so glad that it's a conversation that we now can talk about. And then also, because I had a conversation with LA County, with the police department, the police chief that came into Leimert Park, into where my agency is, to talk about how they were looking at mental health. You know, one of the things that we all know, and we know just from this last year, that in the African American and minority community, there's a lot of injustices happening. When you're dealing with someone with mental health, you can guarantee that it's even worse, 10 times, 20 times more, you know, far worse, and been incarcerated for long periods of time. When if we could get a stronger component of mental health partnerships, components together to work together to address this, and also demystify some, you know, understanding all these things that were just mentioned prior to me coming on, that, you know, how do you really educate? And we say transfer power amongst people to make sure that everybody's leveled up in terms of their knowledge and understanding around the conditions and how to best get engaged and involved on the different levels. So it's really exciting to hear that your work. And I have also had a brother that was paranoid schizophrenic, and he died.
You know my experience, yeah, and it's a shared experience. It's a common experience. You know, 50% of us need some kind of psychiatric help at some point in our lives. You know, there are some questions coming in that I do want to. We are live, so we could deal with this, and perhaps I'm going to turn to you, Dr. Sherin, to talk about this. We now live. Well, let me put it this way: when we made the film, we said that the crisis that we were documenting was the greatest social crisis of our time. But I think that it's fair to say that's now been replaced by COVID. And 20% of people who get COVID have psychiatric illness as a consequence. Very few of us are spared from the anxiety. And I think that many people watching are wondering not just about the ailments we're talking about and the situation we're talking about, but really what can you suggest? Where can people go for Los Angelenos that are struggling with mental health problems right now in light of the COVID crisis?
Well, I mean, the COVID crisis is I think one of a number of unprecedented challenges that we face right now. I mean, it's ravaging our economy. It's isolating people, which is a dangerous thing. And then we've got, other issues related to ongoing social injustice and even a threat to democracy. So, I mean, it's a pretty special time. Of course, actually, behind me in my office, you can see the DMH helpline. That's a number, 800-854-7771, that people should always feel free to call, because whether or not we help you there, and we can provide real-time emotional support, We can also triage individuals to the types of services that may be the most helpful. In LA County, we offer Headspace free to everybody in LA County, which is a very helpful mental health tool, technology, and other stuff that's coming down the pike, including virtual treatment. But one of the things that I kind of mentioned and I really believe in is that treatment is critical, but the social, what we call the social determinants, and I call it the people, place, and purpose, is just fundamental to everybody. We need people that we can connect with, and whether it's our family, whether it's kin, and I will give Governor Newsom some credit for signing SB 803, which is a peer reimbursement bill, because we know that people who have suffered from mental health challenges can provide engagement and support in ways that the most trained clinicians never can. It also gives an opportunity for people to develop, careers. As far as the place, we're 500,000 units short in LA County. So this ongoing epidemic continues, but we need people to reach out to the county to try to get help with shelter, whether it's permanent or it's not. And another thing which I'm just going to say that I think is often left out of the equation is purpose. Whether it's going to get education, whether it's volunteering, whether it's getting the training and employment, it's absolutely critical to everybody, no matter the disability or challenge, to have purpose in their life, to be connected to their community, to society, and to achieve well-being. So I say that to people in the context of COVID: figure out your new routines. If you're a kid, figure out what the solutions are in your classroom. In the county with all of our colleagues, we're trying to figure out how to do things more efficiently going forward. And I would say that to families, to neighborhoods, to communities: find purpose in all the challenges. Let's see some post-traumatic growth as opposed to post-traumatic injury from all of the stressors that we are currently facing.
What a great call to action for people who are suffering. I want to turn to DA Gascon and Judge Armstead. One of the issues that comes up constantly, you've talked about prosecutors, but one of the issues, and this was touched upon, but one of the issues that comes up constantly is that mental health crises are one of the few, if not only, health crises where routinely the police are called into action. And we know that has some very bad consequences. Sometimes, thank God, the police are there often, but 25% of fatal police shootings often have to do with the person who has mental illness. I'm wondering, District Attorney and Judge, maybe you both could speak about this, how you expect or hope to deal with that, the issue of police as first responders and the challenges that they and the patients and their families face.
Yeah, you want to go ahead?
Sure. I mean, well, the first thing is that Dr. Sherin and I are heading the alternative crisis response for the county. And so that is exactly the job that we'll be doing. We'll be working on who responds first. So, as you know, the federal government, there's a 2-year requirement that 988 is online. The county said that's too long. You guys need to pick up the speed and make that happen right away. And so even today we were meeting about that. So it's everything from, how does dispatch respond? What kind of questions are asked, and who goes out? So we're trying to build that up as we speak, because we know that most people do not become police officers because they need to be social workers and intervene, right? They become police officers for a whole nother purpose. So we need to make sure we get the right person to the right call. But with all of that, we also have to train enough police, which we've done a lot of it, but we have to continue to do it, because there are times when, they'll have to roll out, people will have to come out with a police officer, because we've seen the cases when it's necessary and they have it and people get hurt. So we have to make sure we have a balance. But that is what we're working on right now. And that's what alternative crisis response is that the county is working on. So.
Good. District Attorney, please.
Yeah, and I would just say, and I would add to it, that I think that we need to begin to reimagine the work of police in our country and the criminal justice system. So I think at the core is that we need to stop sending and calling police to handle many of the things that we currently do. That's not what they're trained to do. That's not what is the best use of that resource. So it's really shifting the conversation around what is the role of the police, what is the role of the prosecutor, how much jail space do we need, right? It's a complicated puzzle, and certainly mental health is a big component of that. And I think the county's moving along very well. The city of LA, by the way, is also taking similar steps. For those people who are not familiar, this is a complicated county with 88 cities and a lot of different jurisdictions. So there are many efforts going around the county, and I think everybody recognizes that we need to shift the way we do our work. We just need to figure out a way how to get it done right.
Thank you. So we have time just for one more question, but I'm going to start. I'd like to start with Patrick, and then Felicia, then Dr. Sherin, and Judge and District Attorney. Maybe you could all answer this. But the question, I think, on everyone's mind, whenever we show the film, whenever they read the book, is there a call to action? Is there a simple thing we could do? One of the things I say, well, you could talk about it because mental illness is a silent killer and something not talked about. But is there a specific call to action that you would urge? Patrick, please.
Yes. One, first instance of psychosis. First incidence of psychosis, we ought to have a mandate that insurance companies fully cover coordinated specialty care. We ought to use the Prop 63 money to do that. We know early intervention can stop the cycle down the pathology of these illnesses, and if done correctly, can for many people to reduce the lifelong burden of these illnesses. On the trauma side, nurse-family partnerships, at-risk moms and babies. Why we don't do what we know works in those areas is the ACE study, adverse childhood experiences, need to be part of a screening process for every child going into public education. We need to have social emotional learning skills, problem solving and coping mechanisms, skills developed in elementary and secondary education for us to ward off the stresses that our young people are facing, which are leading to record high suicide rates, climbing at the highest levels amongst our young people. And as I said, we need to get our financial systems aligned to pay for these things. So I just want to thank everybody who's giving their lives to this. I can tell you that district attorney and the judge and the director of the LA County are public servants. They're all incredibly capable people who could go out and make a lot more money than they're making. I hope it can help people have faith. There are people that are good public servants out there. It's time to bring back a sense of service to this country, as John said, and we'll all be better off for it. And thank you again, Ken, for the film.
Oh, thank you. Felicia, call to action for everyone watching.
Well, my call to action is, it's important for us to be advocates. We must learn how to advocate for yourself, your loved one, and your family in the communities that you work in. And I think that is and to bridge that voice across the different spectrums, you have to begin and get involved and active when it comes to policies that are surrounding this, built environment. What is the voice that is necessary to make sure that there's a mobilization around the destigmatizing mental health and understanding how do you help your family or loved one survive through this? Because that is the main issue. And then how do you bring all these entities to do wraparound a cohesive treatment plans to make sure that the treatment is done effectively and without punity? That's what I would say.
That's beautiful. District Attorney, a call to action.
Yeah, hearing so many great things that are already being said, but I will say that, educate yourself, by participating in forums like this, and then go out and demand that your public policy entities are following through with this. I think in LA County, there's a lot of good stuff going on, so be vocal about it. Continue to support this. Often you see the board of supervisors trying to shift the funding in the right direction, and they're getting a lot of political pressure sometimes to go on another way. It will be good for people also to come in and speak in support of what we're trying to do, what they're trying to do. I think that, there is a lot of power, people power involved when you speak up and you support this effort. So, get engaged, become educated and get engaged.
Right. And as a consequence of that engagement, you are here with us, District Attorney.
That's right.
So thank you. Judge, a call to action, please.
It's hard to follow all of those brilliant ideas. I want to say everything that they said. So a couple of things that come up for me immediately. I love what Patrick said around trauma. I think that's an area that we forget about quite often. I think that quite often we see early, experiences with trauma that are not addressed, and it just perpetuates and makes things worse. I see a lot of people in our system who were in the dependency system, right? And they experienced trauma time and time again, and there weren't efforts put in place to protect them. And I think that's definitely an area. The other thing I think, particularly for groups of color, we have to move away from denial, right? No one wants to really talk about mental illness. And so we kind of wait until it's exacerbated before we're willing to deal with it. And so I think that that's very important. A lot of things have come up for me around COVID. I think, technology to some extent has caused us as a society to become somewhat superficial. And so we're not really doing deep dives and check-ins with people. I think it's really important that we really see how people are doing and see how we can support them and help them as they're going through challenges. It's been, the isolation I'm sure has made things worse, but I think to some extent, he also talked about social and emotional intelligence. I think that we have to be real humans and really see how folks are doing and really intervene in the ways that we can. And my last pitch is that I think we need to encourage those of us who are on boards or who have access to really encourage more public-private funding to really put our dollars where our mouth is, because, when we forget about the least of us, we forget about all of us, and we're all impacted. So I think that that's really important. So, yeah.
Thanks so much. And Dr. Sherin, your last succinct call to action.
Well, I echo what folks are saying here, and I would say that we have to be more connected. I think that connectedness is the ultimate, elixir, and we have to recognize our interdependence now more than ever, based on everything that's happening. And a part of that, and I salute Patrick on his work around parity at the federal level and also at the state level. We have to recognize that mental health really must be a right, and that there's nothing that can be done in the human without recognizing that fundamental piece of the human condition, which is, mental health. And that said, and getting back to connectivity, insurance companies have to be involved at a very, very fundamental level in paying it forward as a collaborator with the public systems. And not only that, the funds that we get in our system, we have to be able to use flexibly. So when the government is disconnected from the trenches, and what we're doing is taking care of medical charts and auditors, as opposed to the human beings that are suffering, that we're here to care for, big issue.
Thank you, Dr. Sherin.
Amen.
So, amen indeed. Well, actually sharing the film with everyone on this call, especially people who can really change things, is truly an honor of a lifetime. I really do mean that. And I want to thank my panelists for being with me. I want to thank you for watching. And now we're going to watch the last half hour or so of Bedlam, and then I'll be back with Vicki. But until then, I'll see you again, panelists. Thank you so much. And we now have to turn off our phone, our cameras and everything, but we'll be back, or I'll be back after the end of the film. Thank you again. Bye-bye.
Ken, are you there?
I am indeed here.
Dr. Rosenberg, Ken Rosenberg, thank you for sharing this powerful, evocative film with our open mind audience. It was truly an honor for us to have the opportunity to screen your film. And what a gift you have given to society by making it. You wrote it, you produced it, you directed it, and you poured your heart in it, and even shared your own personal story about your sister, which brought me to tears. We are so grateful to you for making the film, and so grateful to all of our preeminent panelists who shared their evening with us, and their expertise and their vision for a better tomorrow with their call to action. Judge Armstead, Dr. Sherin, you, Dr. Rosenberg, Felicia Jones, and DA Gascon. We are so grateful to you, and you give us hope for a better future for all the people who live with mental illness and their families. Really an honor. Thank you.
Sure. I just want to say, you know, for people who want more information about mental illness, the National Alliance on Mental Illness, NAMI, is a very good place to go. And you could also get more information at our website, BEDLAM Film, BEDLAM film.com. And I also want to say, you know, this is a very, as I say, a very challenging time for Los Angelinos, for America, or for the county in particular, but it's also the eve of a presidential inauguration. And I agree with you, Vicki. I think that what we've heard tonight shows us not only that LA could be the epicenter of a crisis, but also a model for change. And I think it gives us a lot of hope for the future, frankly. So thank you for letting me be a part of that.
Well, thank you. And thank you to all of you who stayed on for the entire program. We are very, very grateful to you. We hope you'll join us for more open mind programs. You can find the schedule of events on our website, friendsofthesemmeleinstitute.org. Our next program will be a week from today, the 26th of January, when we'll welcome Lisa Celine Davis, who is the author of the new book, Tomboy. And she will be joined in conversation by Dr. Yalda Uhis, who is the founder and executive director of the Center for Scholars and Storytellers at UCLA. This discussion was taped, so if any of your friends, colleagues, or family were not able to join us, they can view the discussion on our YouTube channel, which is located also on our website, friendsofsemmel.org. We wish you all a good evening. Stay safe, stay healthy, and we will see you next time. And thank you again, Dr. Rosenberg.
Thank you. Bye-bye all.
Good night, everyone.